Okay, hello and welcome to the 41st Virtual History of 2021 and our final Virtual History of the year. This is Nathan Denny's Associate Director of BAF. First, thank you to everyone who donated to be with us today. Since the beginning of the pandemic, BAF and Baltimore Heritage have hosted 71 virtual histories in total. It's thanks to your support that we've been able to host these live and create a library of content about Baltimore history and architecture on YouTube. Thank you so much again for your support. And today we are joined by Megan Oliver and Michael Humes from the landscape architecture firm, Mahan Rykiel. They are here to discuss the design of the park, which opened last month. Mahan Rykiel was selected by the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore to reimagine Rash Field to be Baltimore's destination location for diversity of uses and users from across the demographic spectrum who are interested in health and wellness, arts and culture, local food, and urban nature. Planning for such uses involved a diligent public engagement process that necessitated numerous community stakeholder meetings and solicited input through website surveys and focus groups. They also worked with the architecture firm Genzer, who designed the BGE Pavilion, and contractor Whiting Turner. The project has already picked up a couple of awards, an AI Baltimore Excellence in Design Award honorable mention, and a Maryland ASLA Honor Award. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat or the Q&A box. With that, take it away, Megan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathan. I'm going to steal the screen back here. So welcome, everybody. Can you see my screen, my presentation here? Should go black for just a second.
Yep.
Okay. So welcome. Thank you for the introduction, Nathan. Today, we are very excited to be speaking about the Rash Field Park project, which just opened, as Nathan said, a month ago. Just before we begin, a couple of folks that we want to give acknowledgements to. Our team, including, including ourselves, myself and Michael, who will introduce ourselves in just a moment. We want to acknowledge a Waterfront Partnership as the client for this project, in addition to a number of folks, firms, organizations who had supported us throughout the effort. In addition to the ones that are listed here, there were many, many others, including community stakeholders. We'll be acknowledging them in just a minute. Before we begin, a quick introduction about myself. My name is Megan Oliver. I'm a planner and a designer with Mahan Rykiel Associates, and my passion is really in creating spaces that foster health, well-being, and engagement with the community. And so I focus a lot on community participation and our participatory design process that we employ on all of our projects. I'll be talking about that in just a moment, but before I do, Michael, I wanted to give you just an opportunity to say a few words about yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Michael Humes. I'm a senior associate at Mahan Rykiel Associates. My primary focus in our firm is working on mixed use retail and redevelopment. And part of that, I focus on efforts such as Rash Field, where we reposition existing infrastructure and turn it into much more functional and usable spaces. And really happy to be here today to talk about the Rash Field project.
Wonderful. So yes, we are going to be talking about Rash Field. If you were not familiar with the name of it, I'm sure you will at least be able to recognize the location. It's at the southern tip of the Inner Harbor. It's about 7 acres. And previously, before we really began our effort to facilitate the redesign, it had the Baltimore Beach volleyball courts, the Kawasaki Memorial. It had the Pride of Baltimore Memorial. It was a mix of passive, active recreation opportunities that we really wanted to expand as we moved forward. But before we got involved, Waterfront Partnership launched in the summer of 2015 a resident survey to get a feel for what folks in Baltimore really wanted to see Waterfront Partnership focus on as it helped to revitalize the Inner Harbor. And that survey really served to identify the need of improving spaces around the Inner Harbor and creating it a more appealing spaces for residents specifically. So Waterfront Partnership set out to create their RFP, and as part of the RFP, the purpose of the project was identified as upgrading the existing features, building on the positivity of the existing space as it drew in locals, and to help to attract more residents to come use the space. In addition to that, the scope included focusing on the process that it involved both residents and tourists alike. So we'll see a little bit how that sort of a point or thread is woven throughout the process, recognizing a little bit of the history of the area as well. So I'm going to go quickly into the history of the site. I will give the disclaimer that I am not a historian, that I'm sure that many folks that are watching are much more qualified to speak about the history of the Inner Harbor, and that a real deep dive would give us a much more complex view. But just to go back in time, of course, Baltimore being on the water really is what drew the initial settlers to the area to develop, giving an opportunity for commerce. The Inner Harbor over the years had been a source of, in addition to commerce and industry, it began to attract downtown businesses, and it began to be a place for residents and visitors alike. In the 1960s, some of the piers, the very historic and aging at that point, started to decline. And so the approach was almost a blank slate, tabula rasa, trying to think about taking everything down and just starting from scratch. And so we see here that the area, if you want to take a look, this is where the Harbor Place is today. This is where Rash Field is. This is the visitor center. The highway movement, of course, of the 1970s saw that sort of development. And that is really when we saw the start of citizen participation. There was a successful effort to stop the highway from crossing over the Inner Harbor, if anybody remembers that story. In 1973, the area started to be cleaned up and started to become an opportunity for serving the communities through open spaces along the waterfront. We start to see that there's the Science Center being developed in 1973. And then in 1976, the city celebrated its bicentennial, and we see that the area, which was known as Baltimore Common, became the space for residents to come and celebrate and to gather on the waterfront and enjoy that scenery. Then, of course, in the 1980s, Jim Rouse came in and the Harbor Place development project started to be developed. And so there's kind of a mix of feelings here, of course. The Harbor Place did serve to revitalize the Inner Harbor, downtown Baltimore, but in the process, it required taking away that public space from the community. And the citizen participation, where it was successful in stopping the highway, citizens were not able to really prevent the removal of this common green space that they were using. So Baltimore, Rash Field became this central space for residents to use in the 1990s and the 2000s. If anybody's from the area, you'll probably recognize some of these photos. As a kid, I remember going there and ice skating. Baltimore's first Inner Harbor ice rink was there at Rash Field, whereas now it's at McKeldin Plaza, or right near the Inner Harbor Place. So that's a quick little backstory of the project. And I want to go now into our participatory design process. So the philosophy at Mahan Rykiel Associates, we believe that every project is incredibly enhanced by the participation from various stakeholders and different user groups. So we see ourselves as helping to collect all of those ideas and feed that into the final project. In contrast to a more conventional engagement approach, which uses limited tools to reach limited stakeholders, resulting with limited potential, through participation, we believe that we're able to really expand the project potential by bringing more stakeholders to the conversation and to the design process. And that started before we even began to work on the project. In our proposal, oftentimes teams will come to respond to a request for proposals with an idea in mind or suggesting how the project might unfold. We, however, believe that it was really important to suggest that as the designers, we of course have ideas, but we cannot tell the community what needs to happen here. The only way to decide what's going to happen at Rash Field is going to be through engaging with the community members. And so our approach was to identify various elements and strategies, tactics and outcomes, and use that as a way to craft different formulas of what might happen there. And of course, this could be infinite just by identifying different elements there. So we really were saying that this is a menu, a palette of options that could happen at Rash Field, but we needed to really engage with the community before we identified what was going to happen. And so at the start of our project, we identified a comprehensive engagement and outreach strategy. This is what it looked like at the very beginning. Of course, if we went back and added in all of the little meetings that were added after the fact, this would be peppered with them and it would be a much longer calendar. But we set out to engage with the public through public meetings, participate in focus groups, pulling in special interests to hear what residents and community groups had to say, to understand thoughts from the design community, to hear from institutions, nonprofits, educational representatives. We really tried to understand how each of their specific and specialized needs could be fulfilled with this redesign. Our engagement process used branding and marketing outreach materials to help identify or create an identity for this effort so that it would be recognizable in the minds of all of the residents and stakeholders who did get involved. That way, throughout the process, they could continue to see glimpses of these little marketing pieces and understand that that was another opportunity for them to participate. We used an online website which hosted an online survey. It provided residents and stakeholders with an opportunity to get resources about the project. And then it encouraged residents and stakeholders to share information about the project and get their friends and family involved. One of the tools, before I go into that, we used a number of public meetings. Our first public meeting used a live polling opportunity. Attendees were encouraged to use their own devices to connect to a poll. And for anybody who did not have a device that could connect to the internet with them, we set up a row of computers so that they would be able to participate in the same tool regardless of their access to technology. We engaged, as I said, with stakeholders. On the left here is the harbor happenings. That's business and commercial interests, hotels and attractions. We engaged with the Inner Harbor Project to really get the youth voice in here, recognizing that youth are going to be the future users of Rash Field, and that just makes their thoughts, their needs that much more important. We used a survey to understand how people were currently using Rash Field, how they were coming to the site, and by what mode, and from what origin location. And this further reinforced that a lot of people are coming from the surrounding areas, from their homes, making it an ideal destination for residents, in addition to being a part of this larger Inner Harbor attraction for visitors. Now, the survey, like any survey, we recognize that it's just one touch point among many that we use to engage with the community. And so it's this whole package of opportunities to reach out to the community: public meetings, surveys, polling opportunities, field visits, focus groups. All of this has to be included in the package to come up with a very thorough understanding of what the community desires and how we can best serve those desires. I'm going to end with just a few quotes from some of our public meetings that really emphasize the platform that we started to develop our designs from. This one here I loved because it's talking about just making this a place for both locals and visitors. That's a theme that really came throughout the entire process, both through engagement and then also in our efforts to come up with the design. People wanted to see it as a vibrant, active, and ecologically rich waterfront, again, serving residents and visitors, and in this case, wildlife. So how can this really meet all of those needs, be an active recreational opportunity, and serve the waterfront? This next one's a long one, so I'll just try to go through it pretty quickly, but Rash Field should provide a versatile place for locals and visitors to use and intermingle. Any future design of Rash Field should work towards this purpose and allow a smorgasbord of people to engage in recreation there together. Socially unifying spaces are crucial to the fabric of our cities. Having a place of repose, recreation, and unity so close to the heart of activity in Baltimore would be nothing but a boon. And as I look back and I read this after years now of our pandemic and social or physical distancing, it really just reinforces the need for spaces like this to bring people together, to allow people to gather and provide outdoor, wonderful, engaging opportunities for people who visit the Inner Harbor to enjoy and experience all that Baltimore has to offer. With that, hopefully that helps to give a quick snapshot of how we used our engagement process, the participatory design process, to really create the start of something much, much bigger. And with that, I will turn it over to Mick to take it forward.
Thanks, Megan. So as with all of our projects, we start with some analysis and just understanding the site constraints and opportunities that are present. One of the important things to understand about Rash Field is some of the barriers that exist with the existing infrastructure, both with limited access from the waterfront, as well as it's kind of cut off along the key highway corridor with its bleacher infrastructure and the former pavilion that existed there, really making circulation around the site a challenge and oftentimes not very accessible, if you're in need of ADA access. Here are just some of the structures that had existed on site that we needed to keep in mind. Many of them very brutalistic and not engaging for the community. We also took note of existing vegetation and microclimates within the site. The site was really lacking of trees and vegetation, areas for shade, predominantly a sun-exposed site because of those constraints. With the western portion of the site over here, predominantly it was all pavements, a lot of cobblestone, not a lot of activity happening there. And then we dove into what was bringing people to Rash Field, really looking at, what was the program of the existing site, or how had the program changed over time. And what we found was that the majority of activity and what was drawing people to Rash Field was focused on just beach volleyball, with the remainder of the site over by the Baltimore Pride Memorial, as well as on the western side of the site, not really being engaging anymore, not functional. Pavilions weren't being used, and a lot of infrastructure that was out of date. Based on all of that analysis, we were able to start to get an idea of what was lacking within the project. Where we had one activity before, we knew that we needed to start focusing and shifting over to diversifying activity to really engage the community and make a park for everyone, regardless of what your interests are. So that's kind of a starting point where we started to diversify the programming within the park. We also knew that connection was pretty limited to the adjacent communities. Not easy to get to from Federal Hill, not really engaging Otterbein and some of the adjacent communities, as well as anything that's along the waterfront promenade. So that was a core goal, was to reestablish those connections to the local community, knowing that this park just couldn't be reliant on being a park for tourists. It needed to be a park that was for all of Baltimore. So reestablishing those connections was really important to both the client and the design team. We also knew that with the lack of natural resources within the park, that we wanted to draw on some of the resources that you see across the street at Federal Hill, bringing some of that nature down and cascading it down into the park. We also knew that we needed to stitch in some fabric from the inner harbor and really make this space a little more cohesive. We established a basic programming diagram just to start to break down the spaces and understand where different activities could take place, how to zone out the site and make the most out of the 7 acres that we have to work with down at Rash Field. As with all designs, nothing is really linear, especially with the process that we take at Mahan Rykiel Associates. So the park has gone through a number of design briefs, number of sketches. I wanted to just take a minute to show you where we started back in 2015 when we picked up this project. Back then, it was really about starting to engage the public to gain some interest and start to get people activated and excited about what the potential is for Rash Field. It was a lot of looking at and exploring topical solutions that could be applied over top of the existing infrastructure with a limited budget. And these are just some of those renderings showing some of the design ideas that Mahan Rykiel came to the table with to explore, what could we do, what could be accomplished to get people excited about Rash Field again, to make it not just this barren landscape with one activity, introducing some new activities and getting different user groups to engage with the site. It was at the end of that design iteration that we really started to refocus on what was the vision, what was the design intent and the goals of the client and of the community and all the stakeholders. And we really had to kind of put pencils down at that moment in time and refocus on those core values and how we were going to accomplish them. We started a second design phase, which kind of scrapped the previous design brief, which was more of these temporary interim conditions to get the site activated, and went full bore ahead into how can we really create a vision and get people excited about all the possibilities that this park could be. What was it that would make people excited about coming back outside again, to be immersed within a park along the Inner Harbor. And these are just some of those sketches that initial sketches and plans that we had developed to get people excited and thinking about all the potential that the public park could be, and what a public park in Baltimore should be. We ended up landing on this design. So this is just an overall view, looking back at the adventure playground with the pavilion in the background. And here's an overall view of the entire park that was designed, with the first phase being over by the Science Center on the right side of the screen. This is that overall master plan for phase 1 and phase 2, with phase 1 being on the left side of the screen, containing an adventure playground, nature playground, skate park, pavilion and overlook, shade structures, and really an enhanced vegetation, bringing all the attributes of those vision statements into this phase 1. This is the extensive phase 1. And I'm just going to take a quick moment. I know that we're running out of time, but to dive into some of these different areas and just show you some of the pictures from over the last month since the park has been open. This was the adventure playground. It was really catered towards an older age group, but what we've seen is that all age groups are really engaging and interacting with this adventure play. It was about providing a reasonable amount of risk for children to play and to really be excited about coming back outside, to get really engaged with public parks again. And so this playground features stormwater facilities for education, which ties into some narratives with the Science Center, but it also has 2 large towers, a slide, as well as some swings and some other more intense play equipment and some natural play mounds. It's been really well received. I think that all age groups are having a blast with it, and even saw one day a small child with their parent going across this bridge. It was really exciting to see so many different and varying age groups using this portion of the park. We also knew that it was important to cater towards a younger age group within the park. And so this area here is our nature playground. It's really about sensory experiences in nature and nature education. It has grass mounds in it. It has a number of stump mounds, teepees. It has an earth play element where kids can play in a special mix of soil and really engage with nature that way. It has some sand areas, water features, and a lot of tactile surfaces. It's an area that's about being imaginative, creating your own play. We really tried to be minimalistic in prescribing what type of play activity should happen here. And what we've seen is that children are very creative in how they want to play and what they can imagine. And we're seeing that every element in this space is being used in completely different ways all the time, especially the earth mound. Kids love using it as a slide, and it's just been a hit over there. One of the biggest attractions in the park is the skate park. This has a really interesting and diverse community that's come out and is constantly engaged with Rash Field. We're seeing everything from young children to semi-professional to old adults to people that are just starting to learn how to skateboard. It's a super engaging community that they really just, they're a really tight-knit group, and it's been crazy just to see how active they are down there. It really keeps the space lively throughout the day. And if you haven't been to Rash Field, I would encourage you to go. You'll see this space being used consistently. Then we start to move over to the eastern side of the site where we have more of our passive spaces. We have a shade lawn, as well as our pavilion, which in the future will house a tenant, hopefully a smaller cafe space. One of the interesting things about the design here is that it was really important to not detract from it being a park space. And so while it's an architectural statement, we've really done a good job of draping the landscape over top of it so that it really kind of disappears into the landscape. But with that, one of the features of it is this elevated kind of observation area and overlook, which has been really well received as a photo opportunity within Baltimore. And it's drawing a lot of visitors down to this park space to get really great views of the Inner Harbor and start to re-engage with the waterfront. I think that what's been great about this is that we're seeing that this is not just a park for the local community. It's drawing people in from all over the city, from outside and into the counties, as well as people that are just visiting the Inner Harbor. And it's thanks to all these various elements that we're able to cater towards a really diverse user group, everything from parents and children to skateboarders, to people that are just looking for passive space within a park. And I think that it's a testament, hearing all the wonderful things that the community is saying about this, that we really hit the design brief, and we made a park for everyone in Baltimore to come out and enjoy. And with that, we're really looking forward to seeing phase 2 kick off and hopefully develop the rest of this park. Nathan, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mick and Megan. This was a really great presentation, and we've got some good questions coming in, so I'm going to just hop right into it. The first is from Michael. He actually lives overlooking the park, and it's really happy with the result. He says it meets the 3 key attributes of a successful harbor project: families, 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 and it's used heavily every day. And his question is about the skate park. He says he's really impressed with how it strikes a balance between something that's challenging enough for more serious skaters, but also accessible and safe for newbies. And I was wondering, like, how do you strike that balance in the design?
Yeah, I think that it really is a tribute to our skate park designer, Grindline. We had a lot of engagement sessions with them and just working through what was really needed for a skate park and the different elements that needed to be incorporated. It's a really challenging environment to work in down here just because of the limited space. And so we tried to cater towards some obstacles that were a little bit more intense, but also making sure that we integrated obstacles that were fun for younger, newer users to engage with as well, but without compromising and catering to one group or the other. But yeah, huge testament to Grindline and just understanding the need to make this a well-rounded skate park.
Great. And this one is a comment from Klaus, who's saying that he's been there a couple of times, once with his grandchildren, and each time he's went, it's been teeming with adults and kids. And so it's been a huge success of how you've been able to make this a space that brings together such a diversity of users. Again, congratulations. And then here's a question. How do you get to the park with public transportation?
I'll hand Megan, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I saw that question, so I was actually pulling up the map to see if I could figure out what the bus lines were. I couldn't get it fast enough, but there are bus lines on Key Highway and then on Light Street as well. And then the light rail stop, the closest one would be at Camden Yards, which is just going to be a couple blocks to the west of the stop. In addition, there's the water taxi, which takes you right into the Inner Harbor to a number of different spots around the water. So I think those are probably going to be the 3 main transit opportunities for getting to the park.
Great. And does the circulator go down there too? Oh,
good question. I don't know, but I'll pull it up and see if I can answer it in a minute.
I believe it does. Yeah.
So great. It is nice and well connected with a few different options if you want to get down there. And here's
and the metro stop to the north. Anthony just said in the comments.
Right. Here's a question: is how will maintenance be handled to ensure that the park won't acquire the tired look that has been so prevalent much along the waterfront?
Yes, I'll take that one. So Waterfront Partnership was the client that we worked for on this, and they will have a full-time maintenance team that monitors this area, both for security, but then also just typical maintenance, making sure that trash cans are emptied. And they're partnered with Baltimore Parks and Rec So it's really, it's a team of individuals just making sure that the inner harbor stays really nice and that it doesn't become tired, as you're saying.
And here's another question from Michael, who's saying that as a resident, the lighting has been a real bonus, providing just a bright spot in what used to be dark around nighttime. And he was asking was that always the intent that the site would be accessible for 24 hours, and how did that affect the design?
I can't speak to whether or not it's truly accessible for 24 hours. I do believe that there's some hours that are posted down there. But one of the important things was security, and part of security is making sure that space is well lit. Yeah, it's been part of the design brief from day one, is to just make sure that it's a well lit space, and part of that stemmed out of the existing condition that was down there. It was very dimly lit.
Great. And
I'll just add to that. In our surveys and public meetings, we were able to ask that question to understand if the community felt that the lighting was inadequate, should be enhanced, or if the park should be dim or darker in the evening. So as Mick said, it's kind of always been part of the conversation, and from the beginning, something that we've been trying to balance.
Great. And then question we have here from Anthony, who works at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and also a board member at the Architecture Foundation. He was asking if a copy of the PowerPoint could be made available. He's interested in getting a closer look at some of the original sketches. He was particularly the cantilevered one, and being able to share that with colleagues.
Yeah, we can circle back with you later and circulate a copy of that.
Great. And another question here is who is overseeing the activities ensuring safety? I'm guessing that's with Waterfront Partnership.
Yeah, Waterfront Partnership and Baltimore City Parks and Rec.
Yeah, and so I have one last question, which is at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about this being phase one. Can you talk about future plans for the site, and also, for the rest of the Inner Harbor that me and Michael is working on?
So I'll start, and then I'm sure Megan will have a few things to chime in on. Public engagement is underway, or getting underway, for phase two. So it's been a number of years since the initial public engagement, and it's time to kind of get a refresh on that, understand what the new community needs are, and relook at that phase two area. But there are definitely plans in the future to execute phase two in some capacity. It might not be the design that you've seen today, but the Waterfront Partnership definitely wants to see that come to fruition.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it well, but the one opportunity here is then to observe how phase one is being used, and the success is here, so that we can augment, support, complement all of that in phase two.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Megan and Mick. This was a really great presentation. It sounds like everyone who's been there really loves it. And just so everyone knows, this was our last virtual history of the year. So thank you so much for joining us. And we did record this. So if you go to YouTube and search for the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, you'll be able to find the recording of this program, and also all of our other 71 virtual histories there. Again, thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.